So, okay, it's preparing to go live, so we'll soon be on that. Okay, apparently it's done. Okay, so I believe, okay. Glenn, yeah, okay, I can hear it. Yeah, I can hear it. Okay, right, so we're live now, Alan, on the World Wide Web, on YouTube. So for those that are tuning in at this point, welcome to New Testament Church of God, Erdington. I'm going to try and sort out this sound, which has got a bit of feedback. Okay, here we go. Well, I'm going to start again because this is recording. So I want to make sure it's as it should be. So yeah, welcome to everybody that's tuning in now. This is New Testament Church of God, Erdington, fondly known as New Life Erdington. My name is Junior Buckner, part of the leadership of the church, but we're really pleased to have with us, I'll call you a young man, Alan Langham.
Okay.
And I'll obviously give you a bit of a background shortly. So we're doing this interview as part of the Life Builders, which is our men's ministry arm of New Testament Church of God. And this session is something we call StraightTalk. So it's where we'll either have a discussion or sometimes we'll have somebody in, as we are tonight, to have a discussion about them and their life, their journey. So probably, I would say probably for the first half an hour or so, we'll be talking with Alan and I guess picking bits of his story. And it's an amazing journey. I'll give you a synopsis in a short while, but Alan obviously will be able to give you the real grit of it. And after that, if you're watching live, then feel free to drop any questions in the comment section, and as much as we're able to, we'll be able to filter through some of those and maybe deal with some of those questions towards the end. So without any further ado, Alan, thank you for coming on. I've been instructed by Lee Clark, our men's leader, to make sure that we thanked you for coming on, which I've done. So I know we were hoping to have you down at our church some years ago. I think it's 2016, actually, 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So as we were talking before we...
Overdue.
Okay, yeah. As we were talking before I came on here, you know, it's taken a long time, but although we're not here in person,
yeah,
you're here in spirit and through technology. So I just want to let people know just a little bit in terms of synopsis, and I'm sure obviously there's more to it. So Alan is a former professional rugby league player whose life slid into a career of crime, drink, drugs, and an association with the criminal underworld. In a prison cell in 2013, he had a dramatic encounter with Jesus Christ and became born again. The same streets that Alan terrorized, he now serves, bringing a message of hope to those lost and struggling. And I think I just want to mention at this point that you've also written a book, The Taming of a Villain, and we'll talk more about that a little later on. I guess, well, what I would want to start with is, in terms of what I've just read out there, it sounds very sensational, but obviously there's some very real emotions and difficulties that is a common thread throughout that whole story. So I'm just keen to ensure that as we dissect this, those that are listening understand this is a real story of somebody's life, and not to get caught up on, I guess, all the sensational stuff. Sorry, Alan.
It was complete devastation. They were not, you know, it is that the criminal world is kind of, can be censored, you know, you know, centralized on TV and in the media and everything else. The actual reality of living that life and that lifestyle. Just today, you know, I've had to go and see somebody's father who was a 33-year-old has died tragically this morning. We haven't got the full details of it, but it's looking like it's from that lifestyle that we led for so long. And that's the reality of it. You know, I think the main turning point for me during the year really was 2008, after not being able to get hold of my best friend for 3 days. I decided to go down to his house. The Jeep was in the drive. The keys was in the inside of his patio door, and I knew that he was in the house. And initially, I was quite relieved. I thought, oh, he's just, you know, in the middle of a session of, you know, enjoying himself. And I'm banging on the door and throwing pebbles at the window, and there was no answer. So I kicked his panel of his door in and climbed through the door, because by now I knew there was something, you know, something had happened. I went into the house, went up the stairs, noticed some droplets of blood smeared on the walls and in the bathroom. And as I've put my head into his bedroom, I noticed a pile of money, a pile of cocaine, a rolled up £20 on the floor with blood on it and smears of blood on the wall. And I thought, oh, he must have injured himself and gone to hospital. And as I was turning to leave the bedroom, I just saw out the corner of my eye him slumped up in the corner in front of the mirror with a big gaping hole in his neck where he'd severed his own jugular and took his own life. And I can remember that day, Junior, stood on the top of those stairs thinking, oh, I've got to make some changes. I've got to change this lifestyle, you know. And it sounds a little bit selfish, because obviously, you know, my friend would have sat there, you know, in his own wee and poo and an inch thick of congealed blood. Yeah, I knew, but me and him together was a force. We fought together. We sold drugs together. We beat people up. We was formidable, and it felt like my right arm had gone. And I walked out of that house and just shell shocked, started ringing around people and stuff. But looking back, I knew that was then a journey that I had to make some changes and seek help and assistance to overcome the lifestyle that I was in. But I was so part of it and so integrated into it that I didn't have a clue how to escape from it. You know, and it took a lot of years from that of a process of trying to escape that, and you know, I just couldn't get away from it. You know?
So, and that was in 2008, you said, yeah?
That was in 2008, yeah. So I kind of, you know, decided there and then that I needed to make some changes. I went to get bereavement counselling after finding him dead. Then they put me on to, what do you call it, CBT and different things. And really, you know, and I started to work with some fantastic people. But the lifestyle that I led mixed in with drug, you know, chronic drug use. I was a high-level drug dealer. So, you know, we was kind of more upmarket addicts. You know, we always had access to money and drugs. Were part of our everyday lifestyle. So I used to drink heavily, take cocaine, and, you know, and beat people up. You know, that were part of my day-to-day living, and intimidate and bully. And I was an absolute nasty, horrible piece of work during the year. I just, you know, one of my roles was being paid by people to go and hurt people. That was something that I kind of, you know, was one of my side jobs, as it were. And then just to maintain this lifestyle, I, you know, encouraged other people around me, and especially around my area, is that you're selling drugs for me. Especially, you know, so young people around my estate, you know, who were in that lifestyle, you know, I had them really in debt to me all the time and kind of intimidate and take over and control their lives to sell drugs for me. So it was, you know, I wasn't, I used to think, oh, you know, I had to be a gangster. Yeah. You know, and growing up, I'd modeled myself on being a gangster because as a young child, my father had left the home when I was about 8 months old.
So I was going to say, sorry to interrupt you, I was going to say then, going back to your childhood then, what was that like? What was life like, and what do you feel were the influences in that period that put you on this track?
Yeah, I think is my early memories are I always seem to feel frightened.
Yeah.
He's like that, like a scared little lost little boy. That's how I've always kind of thing. I mean, I've got some fleeting memories of some good family occasions and specific, birthdays and Christmas. Birthdays and Christmases always seem to be special, but kind of, a lot of the early stuff, I just seem to be frightened, and I used to get quite heavily chastised in the house,
Yeah.
but also I think most specifically is I was sexually abused by one of my family friend who was a black lady,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of really looking back, I didn't see the effect on it until later on in life, but it kind of scarred me with, I wasn't an activist, but I if anything to do with, the black culture, I stayed away from because of that memory.
Yeah.
Which is quite significant to later on down the life, which I'll kind of try and explain into that. But the same, so I was kind of physically, chastised, then smothered in love and cuddles out of guilt for that chastisement.
Mm.
There was the sexual element to it via a family friend. My father had left when I was just a small baby, and I was told he just kind of stepped over me and didn't. And I had this image of myself laying on the floor as a baby and him just stepping over me. And that kind of I had this hostility inside me, and this, but also that why wasn't I wanted?
Yeah.
What was it my fault? And that kind of, and I think a lot of people, especially with absent parents, will go through that blaming themselves or looking at the situation as if there's something wrong with you. And I just want to just reassure people that that's not the case. That's a lie. There's nothing wrong with you. It's their choices.
Yeah.
And, so growing, in those early years, I got kicked up and down the street by all the older lads. I were kind of a bit of a, I went scruffy. We were always clean and presentable, but my mum was on her own. We was on the social, as it were called. Our clothes were given from, we had to queue up in different dinner queues for our dinner and things. And it just I kind of knew as a young adolescent that I never wanted to be kind of looked down on again. And I kind of vowed that I'd always have the best, the best clothes and all this different kind of stuff. But then,
and this was up in Doncaster. You was living.
This is up in Doncaster, yeah, in Doncaster. And then in 1992, I think this was the major turning point. Then is that I went to bed on bonfire night, 1992, and woke up in the morning to the screams of my sister. I came running down the stairs, running to the room where I'd heard her go into. It had a distinctive sound of the door opening that room, and I went in, and my mum was laid out on the settee, and she died of a cerebral hemorrhage. And I was 14 years old. I'd always I'd lived in the house as the man of the house. I had a very mixed up view of what love was and everything else, because there was violence and love and so everybody my mum gave herself, she'd had such a horrendous life that she was chronically depressed and ate and became really obese. So she said to me, I never want to be attractive to another man again after my father had left. So I kind of got the back end of her life, and the worst bits, where she was completely broken, and she used to sit in a rocking chair and I don't know where she was, but it was a dark place.
Yeah. So in terms of siblings, it was yourself, your sister, and were there any other siblings that were grown up with, that you grew up with?
Yeah. So growing up, my elder sister got married the year I was born. There was a huge difference between, me and my two sisters in that household. When I was 5 or 6, my middle sister, she left to get married as well. So really, from as long as I can remember, it was just me and my mum in the house. So that house was my safety. And it sounds strange, but I had little dens that I'd made, and we'd go hedge hopping on a night time, and then I had little secret ways in and out of my house, and my mum would go off to work, She used to clean in our local pub that my sister run.
Yeah.
And then I'd go and hide around the corner. She'd go off to work. I'd watch her go, and I'd come in. I'd put my hand through the letterbox, open the locks. I knew how to get in and out, and then get my fishing tackle and take out fish. All I wanted to do was fish. It was one place where I just kind of escaped from everything. But then,
a lot of people say fishing is very therapeutic.
Yeah, and it was for me, Junior. And from that day, then I vowed I'd never be a victim again, Junior. I said no.
Yeah.
Like, too many people have hit me and took advantage of my body and done whatever, all this different stuff. Mm-hmm. And I vowed that day, and I was crying, I was kicking the house, the kicking things in the house, breaking the door on the pantry and all this stuff. And one of my neighbours came, and there was an old army, an old sergeant in the army, and he grabbed hold of me and he says, "Young man, you dry your tears, there's women present, be a man." So I thought then, I'm not being a man. I was, and I dried my tears and kind of tried to take over, the police coming and the ambulance and my sisters and friends, and it went kind of crazy. But I just knew that day I was never the same. And something inside me that day, the rage started to burn. I remember going out and seeing friends that night and the next few nights, and then I was again hanging around with those people who had picked on me, and one of them started on me again, and I just absolutely just tore into him and just annihilated him, and it was like, for the first time ever in my life, I felt some kind of power. Right. So over the next 2 or 3 years, I went from the kind of the kid that got picked on to the bully, to the intimidator. Yeah. And then I kind of got thrown out of both schools, and I just started to really deteriorate, got involved with drinking, used to start taking soft drugs. My sisters, bless them, did everything they could to try and help me and support me. But, by then I'd started on that path, and I was, I was a man on a mission.
And so what was the, obviously at that point, obviously your emotions, the rage and everything that you talked about have now kind of set you on a particular path. And as your life went on, obviously there's something's happened, because then you've been become involved with other people that are in that same world, so to speak. How did that happen? What's the incident that happened where you then became involved with others in that lifestyle?
Well, I think what it was is there was a collective group of friends that we was all kind of broken in his own way, and all our little issues. So we kind of all collided together, and we were all kind of a bit Jack the Laddish and a bit boisterous, and that kind of boys being boys and stuff. But then as we got older and older and older, really, I think, the influx of drugs into the communities, and we were a generation where, the house parties had just started, and where we started to take ecstasy and going out clubbing, and things really started to change, because our group split in half. So when we first ever started, we used to just get fake ID and try and get around town and drink. Yeah. And some of the lads carried on doing that, but then some of us got involved in going to the clubs and taking drugs and everything else. So it was just a foregone conclusion that when you've got broken people together, who depend on one another for their own identity, taking drugs, getting involved and full of all these childhood traumas, and also just so angry at the world, because by then I thought, I'm going to show you. I had something to prove, and this massive chip on my shoulder. And I wanted the adoration of my peers, because I become quite good at hitting people. And I used to then that brought attention with it. And they used to pat me on the back and say, "Oh, well done." And I kind of felt like I had to take all their problems on as well. Yeah. And then the catalyst really was, at 18, I had an accumulation of all these different little incidents, and I got my first ever prison sentence. And I was 18 years old. I got an 8-month sentence. And I think then for me it was kind of, again, I'd gone from that peer group of, we were a bit boisterous, but we certainly weren't criminals. We could have a drink, take drugs, and have a fight. But then I was thrown into like the kind of, I suppose, the lion's den for me, where you know, I was sent to prison, and within less than 18 months of that first sentence, I was a chronic heroin and crack addict living on the streets of London. Prior to that, the year before, at 17, I'd signed my professional rugby contract, because from the death of my mum onwards, I just focused on something I was exceptionally good at, which was rugby.
So tell me a little bit about, I guess, as a side issue, a little bit about that journey. Obviously, you loved rugby. You say you're very good at it. Is that something that you were actually aspiring to at that point, to become a professional rugby player?
When I went to the senior school, obviously at 12 years old, then it was kind of like, it was year 8 when we started, you know, but we were called B form. It weren't even numbers, it were letters. And we were, you know, my form teacher was also my geography. Was also my scout leader, and he was our geography teacher. So,
okay,
you know, and I'd grown up in scouts, Cubs and Scouts. I used to go to the local church. You know, I had some people. One of my brother-in-laws was a fantastic, you know, role model, and kind of put so much time and effort into me. And, you know, there were some fantastic people around me, you know, but then as soon as I always wanted to be a footballer, but as soon as I picked a rugby ball up, I was just naturally good at it. And then I started playing for the school team. And then one of my friends invited me down to his team, which was the Doncaster Juniors. So I went down and played in under 13s. So I played under 13s, under 15s for 2 years, under 17s for 2 years. And then I signed for the academy. And then all I wanted to do was play for my hometown club, Doncaster. I was on a kind of unofficial YTS scheme with them when I got kicked out of school at 16. I just used to hang around with the players. But in that kind of time, in that culture, there was a lot of steroids, and there was also a big drinking culture. So for me, I fit in like a glove, because I was a big, strong, powerful unit, you know, and especially then when you started to mix steroids and alcohol into my already chaotic lifestyle, you know, I was a ticking time bomb. And, you know, rugby was my passion, but as, you know, it's a real warning for young people, really, is because I had the talent. I penned a contract. I signed a professional rugby league contract. So I obviously had the skill and ability, but I didn't have the character. I didn't have the role models, and I certainly didn't have the discipline that it took to be a professional. And within, like I say, within a year of signing that contract, I'd thrown it all away, because all I wanted to do was be with my mates and party, drink, take drugs, and be, you know, and some of the older people in the estate were like, they used to kind of idolize me a little bit because I was a rugby player and took me under the wing. And then obviously my sister run pubs. So I was in the pub a lot, around from my mum dying to signing pro, around drinkers. So that's what I thought a man was.
Everything on tap for it, isn't it? But you said something really powerful there, that and I guess you can apply this to all parts of life, that, you know, skill and talent is one thing, but character and discipline is really the bedrock. That's what would really take you further and where you need to be.
You know, fundamentally, I was flawed, Junior. I was completely flawed. And, you know, I mean, the team that I signed for and the team that I was around, you know, 9 of those players were Great Britain internationals in that squad. That squad went on 2 years later to win the Challenge Cup final, which is like an FA Cup final. That's the squad that I was in. I was a 17-year-old, and I was on the fringes of that squad at 17. I played a few games for the academy. I think I scored 4 tries on my debut, another 2 in the next game, and then he put me straight into the Alliance, into the seconds. You know, and I was borderline. You know, I was training full time with the, you know, with Great Britain internationals. So my career was mapped out. All I had to do was knuckle down and go to it. But I was already on bail for a nightclub fight.
Sorry, Alan. Before we went on to the rugby, you were saying then you then ended up in prison, and if you like, I guess that was another catalyst in terms of going down another level, so to speak.
Definitely, it was my desire to be accepted. So because I'd always kind of felt I'd been rejected, you know, I had a big need within me to be accepted. So I obviously then, instead of just going into the prison, keeping my head down, getting out as quick as I can and never ever going back, that short, sharp shock treatment, it didn't. I went straight into it, got involved with everybody, got introduced to heroin, and I took everything else, you know, on a social and a party kind of level, and I thought, oh, it's just another drug. It'll not get me. So I took it, and the majority of that sentence, really, I kind of, you know, I spent kind of taking heroin, but you know, and everything else. I got out from that sentence. I was already on bail for another fight, and then obviously they cancelled my contract, and I kind of just give up on myself a little bit. But at that time, you know, we were young, we were full of beans. There were lots happening.
Yeah.
And then I had that added thing where everybody, I think one of the first people in our community to go to prison. So when I come out, it were like, I thought I was a big cheese. I thought I was the big man. So I kind of played up to that. Went to prison again, less than a year later. Once more, took heroin and everything else. By then, I'd met my first partner. You know, I came out from that sentence because I was just madly in love and besotted with her. We started to do the house up, and then she used to work as a hairdresser in the local town. But I dropped her off for a haircut, and I used to go and play on the slot machines just around the corner from her work. And then I bumped into one of the people I took heroin with in prison, and that was the slope, a slippery slope then for probably the next 20 years or more of a reoccurring door, because then I tried heroin on the outside. And I lived a double life for about a year where I used to drop her off at work, go and take heroin, go back home, pick her up, and I could live that work because I had enough money coming in from my illicit drug dealing and bits of labouring and car washing and anything else I could do to make some money, and I could cover it. But then it got to the point where I couldn't. I'd spent everything. I got rid of everything. And the day that she announced to me she was pregnant with our first child, my eldest daughter, was the day that I knew I had a heroin habit. I was addicted, and the fear that came on me, and you know, that was in the late summer. By the following January, we'd separated. When my daughter was born in the following July, I was in a crack den. You know, that's how fast it just deteriorated. Thankfully, I got 4 years in prison for a street robbery and a burglary and nicking a car. By then, obviously, I'd started to steal from my drugs. And all my old friends and associates had fallen out with me, and some of them had bundled me into a van and kicked me out my own village. And one of them, you know, and then I ended up on the streets of London begging because I went on the run.
Basically homeless in London.
Yeah. So I lived on the streets on the Strand, and then I went to Soho, Leicester Square. Or you just used to get a day ticket, you know, for the tube. Just jump on the tube, go somewhere. I think it was an Oyster card, I think they used to call it, and then get off there, get some drugs, ask people for money, pester people for money. So we're kind of like a glorified beggar, but I'd do it stood up and go and ask people, you know, and just go up to 10 tourists and try and get £1 each. Then they've got enough for another hit, and then that's how it went on for nearly a year.
So tell me, for those that are watching this either now or later, that may not understand the grip that drug addiction has on you, because I mean, you hear lots of stories about people doing things because of drugs, maybe things that never in their wildest dream they would have thought they would have done, but there's something that drives it. Do you lose all inhibitions about stuff, or what is it?
With heroin, what it does is kind of it just absorbs your whole mindset, your whole body. So, you know, initially when you first take it, it's kind of you've got all your weight about you. I had clothes, I had jewelry, I had cars, I had a beautiful girlfriend in the community. Everyone thought I used to swan around like I were, you know, you could believe it. But it takes your character, it takes integrity, it's like a cancer. It just starts to slowly eat away at you from the inside. And what it is that, so those choices that you're making. So one major one for me really was the fact that after you know, running out of money and everything, I went and broke into my sister's shed, and I stole my brother-in-law's strimmer and lawnmower. You know what I mean? But you know, I would have never dreamed of ever doing anything like that to the people I love the most, who put a roof over my head when my mum had died and everything else. But in that it's like it controls your mindset completely. And it's kind of, and there's no other thing on your mind from getting up to going to bed except drugs. You stop eating. You live on like milkshakes and chocolate. Right. You know, you can't go to the toilet properly. You know, the weight starts to come off. You don't care if you smell. You don't want to get back. You know, it's just you deteriorate so fast. So I think I had one shoe on and one boot. I had a pair of ladies' jeans on. That were, you know, the only pair of clothes I had. Yeah. The top, you know, I was injecting drugs into my arms. You know, I was an absolute mess, and the whole obsession was getting as much drugs as I possibly could. And you've got no feelings left. You've got no integrity. You've got no dignity. So I mean, you know, initially when the corona started, we made a bit of laugh of it. I said, "Oh, we've injected drugs out of toilet water. This will not touch, you know, a bit blasé about, you know, and everything else. But that's that you've been congregating in toilets, injecting drugs. You know what I mean? It's kind of, you know, I've seen, you know, people 5 and 6, 7, 8 in a group, and they're just passing the needle around, and that was, you know, the epidemic of HIV and hepatitis and all that kind of the stuff that I've witnessed in prison, and I mean, people inserting the drugs in their anus to hide them, and then, you know, I mean, the stuff that happens in that world is crazy, and kind of it just takes over your whole being and your whole lifestyle. It destroys your families, it destroys those around you, it just destroys your confidence, and it destroys your ability to function normal as a person. Yeah, you're living then in a subculture of society, you know, and every day is about getting a fix.
That's, I mean, I can't even relate. I can relate to some of it, but it's mad. It's mad. But it's the reality for many people, you know, thousands of people. Fast forwarding a little bit then. So basically, using this cycle now of drug addiction, you know, crime, etc. And then we end up in prison. And talk to us about what led up to now your conversion, because there's a beautiful story about a white bird that landed on the window. But what happened before that? So before this, your conversion, your decision to follow Jesus, what kind of happened there? Because somebody came to see you. Somebody came to the prison, yeah. Yeah. So from obviously my mum's death to the signing the professional rugby, to the streets of London, and then I got a 4-year prison sentence, which enabled me to get off of heroin and crack. So I've been clean from heroin and crack for over 20 years. But then I came out from that prison sentence in 2001 as a 20-odd-year-old. I'd gone in at 19. I'd come out, you know, I'd gone in as a heroin addict. I came out as a 19-stone, shaved head, big bald, muscle upon muscle powerhouse on a mission to prove I am not a smackhead, and I'm going to show everybody. And I walked into my local pub that night with muscles bulging out my t-shirt, sort of thing. And, you know, I'll fight anyone. You know, I was absolutely off the scale. Yeah. And my whole meaning and purpose of getting off the heroin and coming out of prison and sorting my life out was to get my first love and my daughter back into my life. And, you know, I'd turned my life around, and everyone, my friends accepted me and everything else. But from within a space of probably about 6 months, I caught her and my other friend together in a compromising position on the settee, and it was as if my whole life had just fallen apart. And that just catapulted me on to a cycle of
I was in about 15 years of in prison, out of prison.
Yeah.
I was off the heroin and crack, but I used to smoke a lot of weed. I used to drink a lot of, drink a lot, take a lot of cocaine, and beat people up and have fights and do all this different stuff. But then I went to prison in 2012. And by this time, the prison was getting harder and harder.
Yeah.
After finding my friend dead in 2008, coming on 4 years later, I was still in that cycle, and I didn't know how to break it. And then this is kind of where it weaves into my early childhood abuse from a black lady, is that I met a black man in prison, who I thought was a CID officer. It was Bruce Dyer, it was a prison minister and also a retired footballer. Ronan Walker, who again was a retired footballer and another prison minister. And they came onto the landing. And this is where going into the darkness is so paramount for people, because I was stood on a prison landing with a mop bucket and mop in my hand, mopping the landing, because the prison officers didn't really want to lock me up because I used to just be so volatile and violent. I had a nickname of Langham. I was acutely paranoid. I had severe mental health. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Just before I got sent to prison, they did a psychiatric report. So I was in prison, and he put a card into my hand with the praying hands, a green card, and invited me down to the chapel. I went down to the chapel that afternoon, and I believe that something significant then started. It wasn't like a light bulb moment for me. It was a place where I could just go away from the normal mundaneness of prison, but also it took me back to that safety as a child, because I used to go to our local church as a child to hide because I felt scared, and it was a place of safety. So I went obviously through into, down into the chapel, and for the first time in a long time, I felt, accepted. I wasn't judged, and I could just be me. I could drop the act and drop the guard. And when I did that, it enabled me to be who I really wanted to be in myself. And me and Bruce hit it off really well. And for the first time ever, I kind of thought, you know what, I've got a bit of hope. And I consistently then started to go down to the Bible studies and just started to get involved. But I think initially I didn't feel worthy as a person and as a man. And what happened is that I got released from that sentence and went straight back to my old lifestyle because of lack of worthiness. And I can remember, Bruce giving me his number and me giving him my number, and he rang me, and I didn't even feel worthy to take the phone call. And I just drifted away from that support that was an offer. Within less than 6-7 months, I think about 7 months later, I was re-imprisoned. And this was January 2013. And as soon as I got into that prison, I just run down to the chapel. I knew I had to get that into my life. It was the only way I could possibly even contemplate making the changes. By then, I was really, really, really depressed. I was broken. I was lost. I destroyed everything positive in my life. I weren't seeing my kids. I wasn't a father. I was a letdown as a brother, as an uncle, as a member of the community. I was a wretch of a man. And I went down to the chapel and just cried like a baby to the guys. They prayed with me. I went back a couple of days later and there was just me, a guy with dreadlocks, and Bruce. And we just stood there and prayed together about being fathers to our children, because we had children in our lives and we weren't seeing them, me and the other inmate. And also the fact that our fathers had not been in our lives as well. So at that point, Bruce led us in prayer, and it was as if the room was filled with the presence of God, and I just came out of that room just physically just moved by the wretch that I was and the man that I'd become, and also a letdown. And I'd kind of built for that kind of all that week. I'd just been contemplating just taking tablets and just ending my life. And I went back to the cell that night, and as the cell door shut and the noise and the you know, as the cell door shut and the noise, you know, really kind of hit home, I just dropped to the floor onto my knees and just cried out, God, if you're real, if you're hearing my cries and you're with me, then put a white dove outside my window in replace of the pigeons. I desperately need you. I'm lost, I'm broken, I'm alone, and tears were streaming down my face. My snot was coming out my mouth. I was sobbing from the pits of my very being. And thankfully, I didn't kill myself. I went to bed, got up in the morning, went to the window where I'd spent hours and hours and hours staring out of it. And then, thankfully, in his mercy, God replaced the pigeons with the white dove. It sat down in slow motion in this moment of epiphany, that I just thought, you know, that was for me. That's what I asked for. God is real, is alive, and something inside me just jumped, and I came running out of the prison cell, and I just said, "There is a God. There is a God. There is a God." And I was just absolutely, you know, just blown away by this feeling inside that maybe this were real, and everything that I'd asked for had been provided. So I committed my life to Jesus that day, which is January 2013. Since then, I've never ever been back to a prison again, other than to speak to prisoners and to take my story into those darkest of places, like Bruce and Ronan and the team brought the hope into the darkness for me. It was, you know, such a dramatic encounter, but the build up to that encounter had been for years. I can remember going into that church where I went as a young boy to hide, and just sat at the altar again, crying and sobbing, "Lord, help me, God, help me," you know. And when I went to answer bail in Wakefield, I was on bail for a serious assault, and I went to answer bail. I remember going into Wakefield Cathedral again, just going up and just breaking down on the altar, just begging for help. I can remember all those years of, you know, of abandonment, of abuse, of rejection, of violence, of drugs, of prisons, of the cycle that just engulfs your life and takes over the mental health, the diagnosis, the psychiatrist, the psychologist, the courts, the prisons, all this stuff that, you know, can really eat away at you. But in his mercy, by his grace, through faith, I committed to the Lord Jesus Christ that day, and I accepted into my life as my Lord and my Savior. And the journey since then has been absolutely nothing short of a miracle. I was released from prison, and it was given the chance and the ability to start to rebuild that broken and shattered life. And I had that ability to start afresh. So I walked out of prison, and I went straight to the pub for a pint. But there was something different in it this time, because when I went into the pub, I said, "There is a God, there is, Jesus is real," and all this, you know, this kind of new start for me. But I didn't know what I had to do or how to function. And everyone looked at me in the pub like gone out. And one of my friends had just been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and I'm like, "Oh, let me pray for you. I'm going to pray for you." And then, "Oh, can I buy you a pint?" And it was all kind of all over the place. But God knew my heart and my desire to change, my desire to help people, my desire to love people. And from that point, significant things started to happen. And I walked into church the following Sunday. And the previous week to that, me going to the church for the first time, Bruce had actually preached a sermon about setting the captives free, and the whole congregation of that church prayed for the prisoners. And I was only 2 miles away in the prison, and they prayed to set the captives free and for the prisoners. And I walked into that church for the first time as a born again Christian, full of issues, full of mistakes, in a real mess. I had no other way of earning money than crime and selling drugs and all the stuff. So I had to start to try and piece together my life. But I knew one thing is that I couldn't compromise, and I couldn't live the life that I led. And I decided to walk away from that life of crime and gangster world and all those different things and the trappings that go with it. And I had to live whiter than white and without compromise. They were the two key things that I wasn't, advised to do. But then went from there. I went to London, back to the place where I had been homeless, and I did a 8-week personal training course and re-educated myself and re-skilled myself. And I started a company called Pink Ladies, which was female fitness. I became a PT and started to rebuild that shattered life. But significantly, from getting out in January, within March, my eldest daughter, who then was 14, turned up at my house and moved in. She lived with me, and I knew then that I had to learn how to be a father. And
just one question, Alan, if I can jump in. What messages or advice would you give to the younger generation now that are sort of mixed up in the crime world? It's glamorous, quick money, easy living. What messages could you use to encourage those people?
Yeah, it's the glitz and the glamour and the trimmings of the world and all the cars, the jewelry, the clothing, the women, all that kind of stuff. It's all superficial because, especially now as we're on lockdown and people are isolated from their loved ones and everything else, is that the one thing that first comes to your mind in times like that is those that are around you. And, it's easy to live that fast life and that fast lane, but it only leads in 3 directions: into prison, or you get killed or you kill somebody. They're the 3 options of that. The 3 options of that lifestyle. A real man is a family man. A real man is somebody that can express their emotions. A real man is somebody that can love and lead and guide and nurture and help people, not beat people up, take drugs, sell drugs. And for young people, it's really imperative that, yeah, it might look glamorous, but when you've been in that world and you've got to look over your shoulder every day, you're memorizing number plates, you're being followed by the murder squad and the national crimes units and international stuff, or you're involved with people that are really heavy duty guys that will shoot you if you don't pay them on time. You're constantly under pressure day after day after day after day, and it eats away at you. It takes everything from you, even though, yes, it might look, glamorous and glitzy, but it's not. It's dark. It's a lonely place, and it destroys your confidence and everything around you. And it's those people around you that it destroys. It destroys relationships. It's
your life now, Alan. Obviously, with everything you've experienced. I mean, when I see you on Facebook and see some of the stuff you're involved in, I'm amazed. Probably isn't the right word, but I'm always blessed by what I see, because it's such a contrast to the world you've come from. So tell us a bit about what you do now, the ministries that you were involved in.
So I went back to rugby upon my release as a chaplain. So I was ordained as a sports chaplain through Sports Chaplaincy UK. Fantastic organisation that tries to get a chaplain in every professional and amateur club now. They want to really push into the amateurs as well. So that's player welfare, player support. So I went back to my old club, Doncaster, where I'd been, you know, kind of kicked out of rugby in disgrace for assaulting a referee, and I went back into rugby as a chaplain. So that was a real turnaround. The fact that to even go anywhere near the club again. Wow. You know, and so I was involved in chaplaincy. Initially, I used to head up a homeless outreach project and go into our local town centres and give out sleeping bags and food and different things. I used to do families in crisis, but I had this kind of, I was trying to save everybody in a day, and I was full of zeal and just running around all over the place, just trying to fix everybody and everything else. And over the years, it's kind of, some things fell away. You know, thankfully I managed to establish myself in all of my children's lives. So I've got 3 children, and in age order, they all came back into my life. And for the last 7-8 years, I've been a constant within their lives, and I've earned the title of dad. And just as I was sharing just earlier, then I had to learn to be a father. So I went to parenting groups, got advice and support from the church members who were, you know, had been dads and granddads, a lot of people who could speak into my life and everything else. But also God just filled me with such a love for other people. And when you've been in the darkest of places and you're seeing the horrendous stuff that I have witnessed, it does something to you where you never want anybody to feel that or go through that. So I'm really passionate about helping people in their brokenness. So I wrote a youth course, the youth intervention program, the Steps to Freedom program. So I delivered that in schools and youth groups. I go into prisons as you know, sharing my story. We try and get books into the prisoners and help the prisoners, you know, in the darkest of places. You know, I'm involved with obviously speaking in events and churches and different things, but just being dad, being drug-free, alcohol-free, crime-free for all these years, is living such a completely different life from what it says in John 10:10, to live life in its abundance. And the abundant life for me is just normality. Is not having to worry if the door's going to get kicked in. It's not having to worry about court cases and solicitors and going into prison again and everything else. And you know, it's been miraculous what God has done within my life. You know, and also the opportunities that He's placed within me and the people that He's placed me around. You know, I never could ever imagine at all that, you know, I could have a life story in book that's out there in the public domain in all over the world.
So some amazing stuff that's happened with that book in terms of where it's got to. So tell us a little bit about the book itself. I guess inspiration has been your life story, but a lot of amazing stuff has happened in terms of where that book has got to.
So I think really is when I first started the project you know, it came by, I suppose, if you could say by accident, as it were. When I had to go back to London to re-educate myself and do my PT course, there was a local church down there at Revival Centre, Enfield, and a fantastic, wonderful pastor called Nick Chander and his beautiful wife, Melinda, and they loved on me. They brought me into their home church. I was training at the David Lloyd Centre just around the corner. I used to go to evening prayer every night after I'd done my training. They give me fuel to get home to Yorkshire every week. They blessed me and looked after me and nurtured me, but you know, in that time. And then just as my course had finished and it was going to be my last week there, they asked me to share on a Wednesday night service.
Right.
I shared there, and that recording then ended up in the hands of a journalist that I met at a prayer group up in Yorkshire. They said, "Oh, you got a fantastic story. I'd love to do an interview with you for, you know," and they did one for our local press. But when I sent him the recording, and the there used to be an online forum called blurt.com, which was like for writers and things to, so they shared this article that he'd written on my story, and a publisher up in Scotland said, oh, we'd love to look at a book of this guy, chapter by chapter. So we did a skeleton manuscript. It went up to the guys in Scotland, and they said, oh no, it's not for us, it's too raw. So we're like, oh, is that the end of the project? And I kind of, I had other chapters burning within me, and the whole project just seemed to hit a wall. And then just randomly out of the blue, I got an email from the publishers now that I'm with Lion Hudson from Suzanne, who heads up that organisation, and said, look, your manuscript's been bouncing around the office for a while. Have you placed a book yet? We'd love to run it. And I said, well, it's been parked up for nearly 2 years. There's lots of things happened in the interim, and I'm no longer in touch with the writer and everything else. And they obviously sourced me Bear Grylls as ghostwriter, and that was Bruce's wife, Janine. She used to call me Bear Grylls, so it was kind of a bit of a funny one for us. And I obviously then completed the book. It went over to be proofread and edited and everything else. And then just last year it was launched. In June 21st last year, it was launched, Taming of a Villain. And just recently we became a finalist in the People's Book Prize, which is quite a big award for literature across the board. And it's, when I was a serving prisoner, I used to read a lot of books over the years, and there was one particular kind of title that one author that I always used to read his stuff, and he happens to be the patron of that organisation who runs the People's Choice. But the People's Choice is so special to me because it's voted by people. So the people on my social media and my friends and family and all these different people have voted. So we went from long listing to short listing and then into finals. So we've gone through three rounds. We're one of 5 finalists. And because of the corona, the awards have been put on hold, and they've extended the voting until the end of May, or the end of this month. And once they're going to announce then the venue and the time and everything of the awards, and I'll find out live at the awards in London again whether we've been successful and won an award for best newcomer and best non-fiction, which is just unbelievable. But that book has gone into prisons, gone into the general public, but it's also gone into an American penitentiary. This blew my mind, and it really challenged me, Junior, on forgiveness, because I got an email from a Gloria Chapman, and I looked at the email, and it wasn't, and I just Googled the name straight away, because I thought, oh, is this spam or what is this? It didn't seem to add up. And as soon as I put the name in, it was littered with stuff about the John Lennon killing, David Marr Chapman, and all this stuff. And there was articles how she'd stood by her husband, and I was like, what's this? And then I replied saying, is this real, sort of thing, a bit cagey. He said, look, no, forgive me. My husband's asked me to email you. He's requested a book, one of your books. He's seen your article in Christianity Today, which is a big American magazine that did an interview, last year. So obviously that magazine must have gone into the prison, and they've seen it and requested a book via his wife. And I was blown away by this, because I thought, hang on a minute, this is John Lennon's killer. And initially I was like looking out window, I was a bit frightened,
just looking for the red mark.
What is this? But then then it challenged me that week, because I'm thinking, initially I was like, oh, no way, I don't want to be involved in stuff. But then I thought, well, if Jesus died for all of us and we can be forgiven of our sins, then if I can be forgiven, then somebody like, David Marr Chapman can be forgiven. And I know there's a lot of publicity, and it's a big story, and there's still a lot of fans and stuff like that. But you know, this is a man that's been in prison a long time.
Yeah.
It's a high profile case. He's well over his tariff, and you know, he sends out Christian literature across the American prisons. You know, he's found God within his sentence, and he serves God through sharing different literature around the prisons in America. And then there was a beautiful lady and her husband came into a shop where I did a book signing. They said, "Oh, our son's over in New Zealand is in a high security, maximum security prison, and we want to send him a book." You know, and I was like, "Wow, I suppose when you're in the project writing it, you don't really think then what happens with it once it's released."
Yeah.
You know, and initially when it first got released, I had this massive fear come on me because I thought, "Oh no, my life's is completely out there in the domain now," and I didn't know what kind of reaction I was going to get. And then when people start then to message you and get in touch, you know, I think, you know, there could be certain issues that they're going through in that book, and they can pull out that element to it. So obviously there's abuse, there's violence, there's addiction, there's bereavement, there's, you know, prison lifestyle, there's, you know, the young person, the lost little boy who there was the healing and the restoration with me and my father and my family and my children, and there's just so much within that story that everybody can take something out of it. And you know, and when, you know, I had a 70-year-old prison chaplain messaged me requesting books, because she said in her own words, "I have seen the power of God work in this type of book so many times." She said that book gets to the places we can't.
Yeah.
And when you kind of imagine a prison environment, you've got people that are broken. Like my story is not even a touch on the tip of the iceberg to what some of these people have been through. It's horrendous brokenness, an absolute web of chaos, just destroyed lives. And when that book can go into a prison cell, somebody can read it and then relate to the guy that wrote it, but then also realize that, hang on a minute, I can change my life around, because if he did it, I can. And that's the message of hope, that Jesus came, he saved me in my mess in that prison cell, but also he can save them in their mess in their prison cells. And that's kind of the emphasis that, you know, that it goes into the places that no normal people can reach. So it goes into segregation. So the segregation unit within a prison is where people are isolated from normal main prison. Yeah. So I had a senior officer from the segregation unit at a prison I used to go to, and I also used to play rugby with this guy. And he messaged me and he said, "I just want to give you some encouragement." It's like, we have got a chronic self-harmer down here. So because for his own safety, that he doesn't kill himself, they put him into segregation, into a cell that is suicide proof. Yeah. You know, and he's monitored 24 hours a day, he's monitored. And I said, during observation, I noticed that he was reading your book. And also during observation, I saw him getting hope whilst he was reading it. And oh man, I mean, I must admit, I cried like a baby when I got that message, because sometimes you kind of think, oh, you know, what have I done? You know, and then other times you get those little inspirations like that, and you think, hang on a minute, so, you know, look at what is possible, you know, from it. And then off the back of that, I started just before the lockdown. I was in the middle of my first like kind of UK tour, going around, you know, different things, you know, churches and events, just sharing my story. Yeah. And one of those churches filmed it, and then that film has ended up now going to Revelation TV, and they're streaming that next month live. You know, because it's recorded in that way, which again is like, so that ripple effect of a testimony down in London being converted into an article, the article being converted into a book, the book being converted into me sharing the story, to being filmed, to that going on to, you know, probably one of the 3 biggest Christian networks.
Ultimately leading to people getting converted.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So it's kind of, it's nothing short of a miracle what's been done. But
Yes.
I must emphasize, to get to that place where I am today, I've had to go into that brokenness.
Yeah.
So I had to go back to London and face my demons of addiction and horrendous stuff that happens when you're homeless, when you spat on and you weed on and and people, men try and force themselves on you and all the different stuff that happened down there. I had to go back and confront all that because I vowed I'd never go there again. I had to go on such a journey of healing and restoration in some of the real dark areas because of the childhood trauma. And it's just crazy how God used a black man, and Bruce and his family took me into their family as one of their own. And I learned so much about Caribbean and Jamaican culture. And then through Pastor Nick Chandler and the church down in Enfield, the African culture. And it's kind of like, it's like now I'm a whole man, and I just encourage people that no matter what they're facing and going through, that there is hope, that there is the ability to overcome it, and you've got to go into that mess.
What would you say to the young Alan Langham? So, or rather, I think we can guess what he would say. But what do you think the young Alan Langham, say 14 years old, would be saying about your situation there or his situation there?
Well, it's
do you
quite.
think to be able to believe that?
I think it's twofold, because had I not lived the life that I've led, then I wouldn't have the ability to reach what I can reach now, because I wouldn't have experienced it. But I certainly, I've had to go back to the young Alan Langham, and heal him. So the memory. So just last year, this is how recent a lot of the stuff, the healing can be. Just the start of last year, I was probably in the worst place in myself that I've been in years, and I was on the verge of a book being released. But I was hurting. And I went to a ministry, a retreat, and during prayer, I picked up the baby Alan off the floor, and I held him into my arms, and it like as if baby Alan sunk into me. And when we got to the memory of me being abandoned as a small child, when I made a promise that I was going to go and spend time, with my father, and I was sat outside the phone box, just tears streaming down my face because I didn't go. Again, I had to go to that little boy and hold him, and again that it was if that memory and that trauma just went with it. But then I had to go. And this is what a significant thing is. When I found my mum dead on the settee, I was in that room, stood in the front room. I was absolutely so scared. My whole life had fell apart. I was a kind of, rough and ready teenager, but I was a teenager, and my emotions stopped developing and growing that day. So during prayer, I was led in prayer where I didn't go into that room on my own. I went into the room with Jesus with me. And in that time then, that 14-year-old boy and child, had the ability. He wasn't on his own now. He had Jesus with him. It was if the room filled with light, and then instead of just seeing that one picture of my mum dead on the settee, I could actually have memories again. It was if I could just see these pictures of our lives, and I've been stuck in the trauma. I have no positive memories or happy memories of childhood because all I could see was a dead body on the settee. And same again when that man put his hands on my shoulders and said, "Just be a man, dry your tears." I had to say, no, it's okay to cry. It's okay to be a boy and everything else. To a young person now to the young Alan Langham at 14, I would say, listen, just go to rugby. Train hard, be disciplined. I should have moved to the club, moved into that area and knuckled down and everything else. But I was too damaged, too broken, and kind of, young people today have got the opportunities and choices to make. And what I say to a young person now is make the right choices. Choose life. Don't choose death and destruction. Choose the slow, play the long game.
Yeah.
Think of, play it cute, be cool. If everyone's running around and they're killing each other and they're robbing each other and it's the fast world and everything else, just take a step out of that and just play the long game, make the right choices, and also just surround yourself by positive and good role models and people that care and love, and get to church, get into the faith, get into faith and get around people of faith, because it is life changing.
Yeah.
It's completely life changing, and it is so special. I mean, the stuff that has happened in just in the last 8 years is, for me, every day I just pinch myself and think, wow, is this even possible? How has this happened? But it's been through having the strength, and it takes strength to go into your mess and into your brokenness. And that's what it is that there's many people that are living in bondage to the strongholds over their lives of stuff that there's never been dealt with. And it can be trauma, it can be bereavement, it can be addiction, it can just be the fact they don't feel adequate, they don't feel worthy, they've had bad relationships or in a bad relationship. There's so many different factors involved. And it's just, that's kind of what I've always been an encouragement to is, look, I understand, I've been there, I get your pain, I feel your pain, but you don't have to live that way anymore. And God's got the ability to come into that time. So for me, the real traumatic stuff has been processed in a way where I wasn't on my own. And that little scared little boy was able to feel safe and secure and go.
Cool.
And then emotionally, I could then develop.
No, that's great, Alan. I think, your whole journey, and I know your journey is still going on, and I'm sure there's still more that God is going to be doing with you, and I'm excited to see, what more the Lord will do with you. But a couple of things I want to do. First of all, thank you again for sharing with us. We're kind of running out of time here, but I want to thank you so much for spending time to share your story. It's not easy. It's very personal, and we don't take that for granted. The other thing I wanted to say is, for those that are watching this, whether now or later, just tell us how they can get hold of your book, The Taming of a Villain. I think the fact we're trying to get this into prisons is probably something we could do with knowing about.
Yeah, so it's on Amazon, it's on eBay and all different things, but the most simplest way is to go onto my website, which is very simply alanlangham.com. It's the spelling of Alan is ALLEN, so it's on the website, so that kind of shows, we've got the books for Prisoners Appeal on there. You can click a link and buy the book directly for themselves, but also what's on there is, there's numerous articles and different things. So we've got a podcast that UCB just did, and that again is up for an award. Very soon the St. Martin's Awards again, which is a very significant thing that. Well, their first ever podcast that they did, but also it's a real David and Goliath situation, because we're one of 6 finalists in this, but the other 5 finalists are all BBC productions, and I believe the judging panel is predominantly BBC people. So I was like, wow, I've seen all these BBC publications.
And Alan Langham, who's that?
They were like, once again, I was like, wow. Even just the opportunity to be, to have my story in that, in those places. So,
well, have a good feeling. Have a good feeling about that, and we pray that, as you say, even if you don't get it, to be there amongst company like that is amazing.
It's just a miracle. But on the website there's the blog, so there's all different things what I'm up to or what I'm involved with. There's the Steps to Freedom program, which again is a real passion of mine, because that for young people, so those in or at risk of permanent exclusion, those that are first time entry into the criminal justice system, serving prisoners, young offenders. It's kind of, you know, that's there for everybody, and that's just taking, you know, that's a condensed 30-hour program. You know, and I get involved in mentoring and different kinds of things. So there's quite a lot of stuff that, you know, we're involved with and that can make a real difference in people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
All I can ever encourage people to do is just really just focus on the stuff that is eating away at them or holding them back, you know, and you know, us with history of victimization, we become overcomers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But to become an overcomer, you've got to go over some stuff. You know, it's and this is the thing is that, you know, I just see so many people stuck in their pain and misery and in the past. And it's kind of unlocking that and going forward and dealing with those stuff where, you know, that's what I'm really passionate about. And I can't emphasize it enough that if you really want breakthrough, it will come, because God will just lead those people in your life and give you the strength to overcome it. You know, I never for 1 minute ever thought I could have a positive relationship with my father, but we've got a wonderful, beautiful relationship. Yeah. I've got 3 wonderful, beautiful children in my life, and I never thought that I could be their father. But the way
God has restored so much, you know, to you.
Yeah.
And as I say, it's an amazing, beautiful, powerful story. I'll say story, it's real life.
Yeah.
And you know, I just pray that, you know, what you've shared, I'm sure will be a real encouragement. We can end it here, Alan, but would you do us the honor for the next 20 seconds, just breathe a word of prayer over everyone that's listening?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. No problem at all. So, Heavenly Father, I thank you for all those that have listened in this evening, Father. And I just pray now that you just start to go into their mess, but their mess can become a message of hope to those people who are stuck, Father, and who don't know a way out. Father, for those that don't know you yet, I pray that you start to knock on the door of their hearts, that you just come in power, in love and grace and mercy, and just breathe your life-giving power over their lives. And I just pray now, Father, that for anybody that has listened to this story of mine that needs extra support, extra help, that needs to know you, Father, that you can reveal yourself in such a confound and profound way, that you just enter into their lives in such a way that they know without a shadow of a doubt it's you. Lord, I just bless every single person who has listened this evening. I bless them in the name of Jesus, in everybody who is going through the corona, Father. I just speak your peace that surpasses all understanding over them, Father, as people are lost and don't seem to know a way, and the anger and the issues that within the communities, Father, towards what is happening. Father, we just bless every single person, those who've been affected by bereavement during this time of the pandemic, but also historically, Father. I just pray your healing touch over them, Father. But I just thank you for the opportunity to share with so many beautiful people online. We thank you for the technology. We thank you, Lord, that you are able to reach people when they need to hear a word. And we hope and I pray that every word that has gone out tonight, that let that be a seed of hope, Father, in people's lives. And that what you have done in this life is nothing in comparison to what you can do in theirs. So I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for everybody listening. And I just bless them in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Well, thank you, Alan, so much. If you can stay on for a while, I'm going to end the recording here. So those that have tuned in live, we do thank you for joining us here.
Yeah, got a few thank yous coming through for you, Alan. So thanks again for your time and sharing such, you know, detailed and, you know, personal information.
No problem.
I'm just going to try and stop that going out live. Getting there.